Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I want you to just take a second and imagine we're sitting right here around a dying campfire. Beyond the firelight, just an absolute pitch black ocean of trees. Today, we're diving into a completely different side of wilderness management. Stuff you are definitely not going to find in any official state park brochure. We're looking at 3 terrifyingly true, heavily documented accounts from actual forest rangers. I mean, these are highly trained professionals who know the wild inside and out. But, what happens when the wild throws something at them that is completely unexplainable? Let's get into it. Sometimes the forest shows you things that don't belong there. Just let the weight of that statement sink in for a minute. When we think of forest rangers, we usually picture them, managing trails, protecting local wildlife, or maybe helping out a lost hiker. But the reality of their job, especially out in those massive, completely off-grid stretches of wilderness, it's far darker. Based on the sources we're digging into today, there's a boundary out there. And sometimes, things just cross over. So what hides in the dark? Picture yourself out there, completely alone. You're miles from the nearest paved road, just completely wrapped up in this suffocating darkness. When you're that isolated, your brain goes into overdrive. Every snapping twig literally sounds like a gunshot. But what exactly are you supposed to do when the sound you hear isn't an animal, and the footprints you track couldn't possibly be human? Let's jump into our first account, the whistling in Black Pine Forest. This one comes from Ryan, a guy with 8 years on the job. It was late October, tourist season was totally dead, the campsites were absolute ghost towns. Ryan was patrolling a dense, deeply mountainous part of northern Montana called Black Pine. It's an area notorious for basically having 0 roads. Right around sunset, he gets this really weird report from a lone hunter. And that number you're seeing, 3, that is the number of miles this hunter claimed a mysterious whistle followed him through the brush. 3 miles. And the hunter swore this wasn't an echo, it was tracking him. When he stopped walking, the whistle stopped. The second he took a step, the whistle started up again. Honestly, Ryan just assumed someone was messing with the guy, but, he's a professional, so he drove out into the dark to check it out. Ryan grabs his flashlight, hikes into the tree line. At first, totally normal. But then, he hears it. The whistle. It was long, slow, almost musical, just bouncing through the timber. Imagine the absolute auditory horror of that moment. Ryan freezes in his tracks. Instantly, the whistle stops. Talk about a cold dread crawling right up your spine, right? He starts walking again, and seconds later, the whistle is back. But this time, it is way closer. For 20 agonizing minutes, this unseen thing just shadowed Ryan. It stayed right behind him in the dark, but somehow it never got close enough to get caught in his flashlight beam. And then, as quickly as it started, the whistling just completely stopped. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what he found next. Halfway back to his truck, his beam catches something in the dirt. Tracks. But we aren't talking about normal hiking boots here. These were bare human footprints, but enormous. Way larger than any normal person's feet should ever be. And they were super fresh. These giant bear tracks had literally circled his truck over and over again, like something was just patiently waiting for him. Ryan scrambles inside, locks the doors, and as he turns the key, he catches this horrifying glimpse in his rearview mirror. A massive, towering silhouette just standing silently between 2 trees, watching him. Yeah, Ryan floored it. He got out of there as fast as humanly possible. The next morning, he actually goes back in the daylight with 2 heavily armed rangers. The crazy thing, those giant footprints were entirely gone. But the physical proof of whatever was waiting in the dark, that was still there. 5 parallel marks were gouged deep into the metal side of his truck, exactly like the drag of giant fingernails. To this very day, nobody has any clue what made them. But because of this, the rangers in that specific Montana district, they absolutely refuse to go anywhere near Black Pine after dark. Because the locals swear the whistling out there never actually stopped. All right, moving on to account number 2, the missing fire tower. This one is a rapidly escalating nightmare from Washington State, involving a ranger named Tyler and this old, supposedly abandoned structure called Eagle Point Fire Tower. To really grasp Tyler's situation, you have to look at this number, 20. Eagle Point sits on the peak of a mountain 20 miles from the absolute nearest town. There's no electricity, there is zero cell service, just you completely cut off in a literal ocean of Washington forest. Tyler was just supposed to do a routine inspection, since nobody had been up there in almost a year. He gets there right before sunset, climbs the tower, and starts looking around. And that's when he spots a random notebook sitting on the desk. Here's the thing. That tower was supposed to be completely empty, but clearly someone had been living up there, leaving behind a logbook. Tyler flips through it, expecting normal stuff about weather and wildlife, but the entries take this deeply, deeply disturbing turn. The previous occupant writes, "Something is walking around the tower at night. Then, it knows I'm here." And finally, this absolutely chilling line, "It keeps pretending to be people." Just put yourself in Tyler's shoes for a second. You're sitting in a glass box, 20 miles from civilization, reading the slow descent into terror of the guy who sat in that exact same chair. Let's move to this timeline and see how this builds, because it is terrifyingly precise. Tyler gets there at sunset, finds the book, and honestly just assumes it's an elaborate prank. But right at midnight, the real horror kicks in. He wakes up to the sound of slow, heavy footsteps. Crunch, 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 just circling the tower. He looks out the glass panels. Nothing. Complete darkness. Tyler is totally trapped. Spoiler alert, he survives the night and escapes at sunrise. But the actual climax of this whole ordeal happens months later, and it totally defies all laws of physics. Now, right before those midnight footsteps started, Tyler had read the very last entry in that logbook, written in this really shaky handwriting. "If someone finds this, don't answer the voice outside." As Tyler is sitting there listening to those footsteps crunching outside in the pitch black, a voice suddenly calls out from the forest floor below. It started off as a woman's voice. She was pleading, saying, "Help me, please help me." Tyler instinctively grabs his flashlight, but then it hits him. The nearest trail is miles away. Nobody could possibly be down there. Then the voice shifts. Suddenly, it flawlessly mimics Tyler's supervisor. Then it sounds exactly like his brother. And finally, in the most chilling twist, it starts speaking in Tyler's own voice. This right here is the sheer uncanny valley horror of this encounter. Each of those familiar voices called out from a totally different direction in the dark, moving incredibly fast through the trees, just waiting for Tyler to slip up and answer back. Tyler stayed frozen in that glass box until the sun finally came up. The second daylight hit, the voices vanished. He packed his stuff and practically sprinted to his truck. But here is the absolute wildest conclusion to Tyler's story. Months later, another ranger was sent up to Eagle Point. When they arrived, the tower was gone. I mean, this massive, multi-ton fire tower was just completely erased from existence. No demolition debris, no signs of a freak storm, literally no explanation. Just a bare concrete foundation sitting silently in the woods. Absolutely wild. Okay, let's look at account number 3, the ranger station visitor. Out of everything in our source material, this is by far the most physical and aggressive confrontation. This wintertime encounter gave the ranger permanent nightmares and actually forced them to request an immediate transfer out of the district. Once again, it's all about that extreme vulnerability. 30 miles. This ranger was stationed completely alone during a brutal winter storm. Heavy snow had totally shut down all the roads. They were snowed in, trapped in this remote cabin, completely cut off, and exactly 30 miles away from the nearest living coworker. Let's trace how this stalker escalated things, step by step. Right at 11 p.m., the dead silence of the snowstorm is broken by 3 slow knocks at the front door. The ranger checks the security camera and sees a man out there in an old coat, his face totally obscured by a hood. The ranger hits the intercom, asks who he is, total silence. For 5 agonizing minutes, this hooded man stands there completely motionless, doesn't even twitch. Then, out of nowhere, the security feed goes pitch black. The power in the station is still on, but the camera is dead. The ranger runs to check the window, the guy is gone. But instantly, this massive bang explodes against the back wall. Then another one. Something starts slamming into the station, darting around the perimeter at a speed that is way too fast to be human. It's been an entire hour just violently scratching and bashing the heavy walls of the cabin. The ranger basically goes into lockdown, waiting in sheer terror for sunrise. When the light finally breaks, they step outside into the snow to see what happened. And what they find just completely breaks logic. The snow is covered in tracks, thousands of them. Footprints absolutely suffocating the entire perimeter of the building. But here is the part that will mess with your head. Every single set of tracks just ends abruptly. They don't trail off back into the woods, they just stop. It's as if whoever or whatever made them just vanished directly into thin air. But right before they vanished, they left a message. Gouged deeply into the snow, right near the front door, were 4 words: "I know you saw." And get this, no footprints led up to the message and none led away. Needless to say, within a month, that ranger transferred out and never, ever went back. I have to ask you directly, what would you actually do if you were miles and miles from help, staring at a security camera that just went dead, or listening to your own voice calling out to you from the dark woods? How would you handle being trapped with some unseen entity that totally plays by its own terrifying rules? So the crucial takeaway from analyzing all these sources is that we aren't just dealing with spooky campfire stories here. These are documented anomalies that completely shatter natural laws. Think about it. We've got giant bear tracks circling a truck in the freezing cold. We've got an apex predator that hunts by perfectly mimicking human voices, a multi-ton structure made of steel and wood that is just erased from the earth, and a winter stalker that moves at impossible speeds before vanishing into thin air. These represent the true, unexplainable horror of the deep woods, the kind of stuff that these rangers have to live with. We've looked at the data, we've heard the first-hand accounts from the people who actually work out there in the dark. So I really want you to think about it for a second. Which of these 3 encounters disturbed you the most? Was it the relentless tracking whistle in Black Pine? Was it the psychological torture of that missing fire tower? Or maybe the violent, impossible physics of the winter visitor? Whatever you decide, I want to leave you with one final, incredibly important piece of advice pulled directly from these ranger accounts. If you ever find yourself out there, miles from the safety of streetlights, and you hear a long, slow whistle echoing deep in the woods, don't whistle back. Just keep your head down, keep moving, and whatever you do, do not let it know you hear it. Thank you so much for joining me for this